I believe I am live. I am super excited to come on here and see what happens. I don't have a great plan, as in a grand plan. My plan today is to say hello, introduce myself. It's something I'm learning to do online a little bit better, a little bit more often. I sometimes forget that people don't know anything about me, why I'm here, what my mission is, and whether what I have to offer might be of some value to you or your family along your journey. I teach courage, how to practice courage. And a really smart woman told me once that we often practice the thing we most need to learn ourselves. And I found that to be true in a lot of ways in my life. And I'm very glad that in my career of choice, it also enriches my life and my family's life. So, welcome. If you're just joining, my name is Patricia Ockney, and I am hosting this live from Nova Scotia. I am out here in my greenhouse, if you can believe that. It started off as a greenhouse, and the wood that you see around is from trees that my husband and I cut down on our family farm and had dried and stored and knew we would construct something someday with the wood. And the frame was built from that. And we had a greenhouse for a couple years and then decided to turn this into a space where I might be able to practice some of my craft. And so I'm a private practice clinical therapist practicing here in Nova Scotia and beyond. I'm also a consultant for workplaces for guidance and training around courage and leadership, understanding our central nervous system and how that shows up in our workplaces, in our homes, and in our communities. And I think through education, that's one of those pathways towards freedom, which I know for myself and for the people I get to work with, the more that we learn, the more. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. So that's one issue with putting myself out here because I know a little bit about um, some things. And, you know, the more you read and watch the scientists and see the data that's coming out, and it's so hard to keep up with everything. It's difficult to put yourself out there knowing that you're kind of going on the record with what you know, and some of it could be outdated. It could not be best practice. And for me, best practice in science is the backbone of my work. Certainly, as a clinician, ongoing training is critical in order to not create harm in people's lives, but create pathways to better health and better connection to themselves and those that they choose to have in their lives. And sometimes we don't get to choose, and we need to negotiate how we show up in those relationships as well. For example, we don't often choose the families we're born into. And I think it's also wise to recognize that our nervous systems were wired before we really even knew who we were. Those early years are so critical. And that's what going back to the sciences is we can kind of separate the self from this system that we're learning to operate. Sometimes that can reduce the shame that we feel a little bit if the system isn't operating optimally. And I think that's defined by the person themselves. And in a world that's full of noise and chaos and telling you who you are, if, as Carl Jung said, if we don't know who we are, the world will tell you. And I believe that to be true. So long story short, I work with people to help them connect with themselves more deeply so that they can connect with others. And the core of the work is really about reducing violence. And and for me, I'm at this, I guess, season in my life and in my career, I'm focused on the violence within and how that violence within our thoughts, our words, and our actions, how that impacts those around us and impacts our own health and our own ability to adapt, and respond in a way that our nervous system begins to regulate, so that we're using that wise mind part of our brain and not the fear. So how can we move more towards love, and connection to ourselves and others, and move more away, from fear? Fear is there, so we can't turn it off or turn away. It's better to turn towards and work to understand it, work to augment, adapt, tweak things in our environment that are going to optimize, our success at whatever that mission might be. So why am I offering some free chats to connect? And my goal is to inspire people by story. So that's why I'm starting the podcast, The Agentic Self. So learning in my own life how to cultivate more agency, even in my own thoughts. What am I choosing to focus on in my mind, and how is that impacting me? What am I choosing to walk past or turn away from? And how is that showing up in my life? So, one of my last articles where I was trying to encourage people to join me today was to share, the number one tool that I found to be most helpful for myself, because I always use that as a framework as well, my own experience, as well as the book knowledge that I have gained over the years. So I have a degree in psychology, degree in social work, and a clinical degree, a master's in social work as a clinician. So that education, super important. Yes. And again, there's a lot I don't know. There's a lot we don't know. And I think if we're more open and vulnerable, we're going to figure things out together in a more beautiful, symbiotic, and authentic way. And in order to be the most authentic, we need to feel safe. We need to, learn to regulate our system so that where we show up in our homes and works and community, that we can again make those wise mind choices. So going back to that tool, the most powerful tool that I found for myself, in my own personal life and in my professional life, science background, is da 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 da. Are you excited? Are you waiting for it? Are you really, oh, I wonder what it is. I was kind of hoping I might get some guesses. So I believe there's a couple of people watching. So maybe you could pop in the chat. I think there's a chat, a message. I'm not sure. Maybe there's not a chat. Um, but if there is a place to put where you're watching from, and if you have an idea of what that most important tool in our knapsack is, I'd love to see that. And there's a lot of them. As a helper, training ongoing every year to maintain my clinical license. Also, as a coach, I'm a certified brain coach. It's called the focus on the science of our central nervous system and how we can ensure our brain is functioning optimally, and also workplace safety. So all of those things combined, in the training I've had, I still come back to this number one um, tool that I find is most powerful. And I was actually asking a few of my clients today and yesterday, for them, what have they found? And they also find that this tool is the greatest of help. So I will reveal that now. Um, and some of this work that I'm going to be doing online makes me so nervous because I'm a helper. And I know that words and ideas that people put out there or frameworks can cause people to have resistance, to have some fear responses or self-judgment. And for me, this work that I do is rooted in self-compassion always. So whatever we're doing, I never want to cause harm. You know, I always want to show up in the best way, in the most positive way that's going to be the most helpful and valuable to people. Because I'm not here to just, you know, talk about myself, elevate my own self. The point is to elevate others, elevate their voices, elevate their stories in service to courage. So how did they step out of fear or move forward with fear? I guess we don't often step out of fear if we're doing something courageous, because you can't be doing something courageous without fear beside you, right? That's the point of courage, is that it's scary. So, what are those stories that we've told ourselves, and what are those things that we've flipped, that narrative that we're saying to ourselves so we can step into that arena. I'm looking forward to sharing stories on the podcast and having so many brave guests on to talk about the ways they've cultivated more courage and authentic action in their own lives, despite or because of what's going on in the world. Because, in such a time of as this, we are called to courage, and we're seeing that over and over and over again. Some of us turn away because we have to, and we're not ready to turn towards. And I honor wherever anyone is, because we all have to start somewhere. And where I am isn't where Mary is, or Bob, or Joe. And neither am I judging where Mary, Bob, or Joe is, because I am Mary, Bob, and Joe. We're all walking this life together. We can choose to go beside. Some of us choose to be leaders, and I think the best leaders are those who walk beside. Um, so anyway, back to the reveal. So I felt I've built it up too much. But the number one tool that I found personally and professionally is the mirror. Yeah. And for me, how that got driven home personally was noticing my scapegoating of, the things I wasn't able to show up and see in myself, the things I wasn't able to take responsibility for or take action for because it was too scary. I wasn't ready. And so when you can see that in yourself, and for all the good reasons the system causes great deals of harm, people lose their lives. I'm going to keep this kind of light-ish, but my work is never light. But systems that are built to suppress and oppress, systems that are built not to encourage, you know, health promotion, prevention, and are instead encouraging noise and disconnection, are creating dis-ease, you know, among our herd. I come from a farm. My roots are farming. I see our species as a herd. And I know that we didn't get sick alone. We got sick together. We got sick by the things we're walking past. We got sick by the way we're taking care of ourselves or not taking care of ourselves. And so for me, logically, the beginning of change begins with us. And again, I love quotes. I just think they're so powerful. Um, be the change you want to see in the world, and really thinking about that for a minute, and getting it in your bones. What can I do in the world today, in my life today, in the grocery store today, in my work today, that is going to reduce violence? Going back to the core of the work I do, how can we reduce the violence inside here, inside our mind and our thoughts and our words? How do we step out of judgment? How do we stay out of the glass house, right? Set down the stones and become curious. But we're so wired for the polarities, so wired for disconnection. And my purpose is to create more connection. And I think as I'm doing that for myself, which I think maybe is the most powerful way to do that, is to lead by example, step into the scary things like podcasting, like going live. This is terrifying to me. And people in my life will share with me that, "Oh, that's so easy for you. That looks easy. You're such a good speaker." And they say these things, which I think are beautiful. I take them on. I'm grateful for their observation. And what they don't see is what goes on inside, which is an inner narrative of fear, scarcity, lack, not enough. Um, and always the undercurrent of is like you may hurt somebody inadvertently in non-consciously, and so just be quiet, don't say, don't speak. And so that hasn't really worked for me because we need to speak. I felt the closing over of my throat when fear takes over and hiding. I felt the heart racing, to the point, and you can hear it in my voice. You can hear it since I started this live. I mean, it goes up and down depending on how quiet the internal narrative is. If fear starts talking to me, then I'm going to say, "Oh, you're going to lose your train of thought. You're going to forget what you're going to say." You're not making sense, because usually when I start speaking in public, whether it's speeches, whether it's facilitating, I'm good with. When I'm working in my leadership training and my group therapy work, that's my bag. But when I step outside of that role, fear comes in because it's new. Podcasting, oh my goodness, putting something out there permanently, the benefit, I'm super stoked about my kids, bringing people on and them hearing stories of agency and courage and bravery and service and love. My wish is that that will be a legacy, that my kids get to hear other people's stories, and that will be there. And who knows, maybe they'll have kids, and that'll be a legacy that continues. So focusing on, the one person who may tune in to hear something that sparks something in them like it did in me, that, oh my goodness, she's doing that. She's terrified. She's got an internal voice that's saying, "Be quiet, sit down, shut up. You don't have anything good to offer. Everybody's already done this." There's people that know so much more about your craft than you do. So why bother? And I hear that narrative a lot with people that I love and care about, you know, the apathy and the it's already been done, and why bother? And I just think that's what the system wants. The apathy, right? Because it sells things. I'm not gonna list them, but it sells things. So why the podcast? For me to step into courage, demonstrate that, imperfectly, like, I just think being real and authentic is a pathway home to ourselves, to feel less alone. And in this world right now, working with seniors, working with young people, mm, all of the populations, but in particular young people, because there's more opportunity for them before those pathways get wired for scarcity and lack and trauma, and the agency to heal it. The more we can impact positively more people, the more our health will improve. Our health of ourselves, of our communities, of our families. The more intimate partner violence will be decreased. The more criminal activity there will be. The more security in our workplaces. As someone who works in critical incident response, I've seen what can happen in our workplaces when this is not functioning optimally. So if we're not tuning in and taking care, right, turning the noise down of what's going on in the world, not disconnecting, but just focusing on what we can do, being aware and mindful and holding the mirror, that's come power. It's always only been one person who's ever made a difference. So why do we think them first? They have to do it first, eye for an eye. The violence perpetuates and perpetuates. And you know what is louder and stronger and spreads faster like a contagion you've never seen before? And you have seen it before. It's called love, right? So, what if we made a choice to hear stories of courage, be inspired by them, remember our agency, even if our agency is measured by taking a breath in the morning and saying, I'm going to contribute more than I complain today. I'm going to try. And you take that breath and you take care of yourself. You're going to drink some water. You're going to get some rest. You're going to say hi to a friend, or you're going to make a new friend, or whatever it might be. You are going to make a choice that yourself has an energy that is being put into the world and that you have one life to take care of. And you are going to do the best that you can with what you have, whether that be having a learning disability, a physical disability, living with trauma, chronic stress. Half of us are living with chronic health conditions. Our systems were not built for chronic health conditions. So a lot of people are falling between the cracks for very good reason. And the apathy people are feeling and the why bother shouldn't be shamed or judged. And when people can't get out of bed in the day, there's a reason for that. Perhaps instead of sitting in judgment, we start moving into curiosity and compassion. And where do we start to practice that? Not out there. Yes, out there, but that's not where it begins. It's never where it begins. Compassion and curiosity begins in here with ourselves. And that goes back to the one tool again, that mirror. Am I being compassionate? And that doesn't mean you're not trying hard and you don't have goals and you're not working diligently with what you have. And some days that's 60%, some days that's 50%. Some days it's 110%. Some days it's 2. And you know what? We will rebound and bounce back after those days if we stay away from shame and blame, right? If we stay towards the compassion, my system must need some rest. I must need some nourishment. I must need some social time or some quiet time or some safety. Because some of us don't have basic safety in our homes and in our workplaces. And that is reality. And when we deny reality, we're denying our truth and we're denying the grief that lives in our bones. Because we all have grief as human beings. We just might not recognize how it's showing up. That's possible. I hate the word expert, but I work in mental health. I work in systems. I know the signs. I know the signals. I know the ways we turn away from our pain so we can get through the day, so we can get through the job, so we can get through this season of our life. Menopause, right? Full in it. So there's so many factors for all of us. And when we can set down the compare and despair, I know. Like imagine if we took that neurobiological wiring we have to scan and started to scan for good, triggering the thalamus to look for the gratitude, the gift, the good night's sleep, where I can be grateful, to shift those pathways from the wired scarcity to wired abundance. And the noise in our world is pushing us more towards scarcity. So I want to go back. And so today I was going to focus on grief, right? And that one tool, which is the mirror. And I just mentioned grief because I think it's something tangible that we can sink our teeth into is grief because we all experience it. So when I did my first live, it was so exciting. And this is exciting, but also terrifying again, stepping into fear. Because I guess really the core of it for me is if you can get out of your own way, Patricia, if you can stop being afraid that you're going to look not smart. You're going to say things that are maybe wrong, or you're going to cause something that's not good. That fear holds me back, and this year I decided that's not going to hold me back anymore, because I know I move forward with love. I know I'm trying to contribute more than complain. I am trying to help, and I think, a lot of people can't access therapy, coaching. They just don't have the resources to get some of the key pieces that can help us really shift our quality of life and our health in a positive trajectory. So I thought, why not start writing more? Why not create a podcast and start coming on lives to just share some of the things I've learned from other people? And I have learned so much from other people. My greatest teachers have been my clients, my customers, my husband. That took me a while to come to that one, but he has been one of my greatest teachers. And he he is he's one of the people who has helped me hold the mirror to myself, and not intentionally. Or maybe intentionally, I don't know, but, we're 30 years together this year, 25 years married, and we've definitely been to the bottom of the barrel and back up again, and we are learning and growing together. I mean, we were kids when we got together. I'm, turning 50 this year, which is another reason why I am, doing this podcast and doing lives, because I'm like, "My gosh, I don't know how much longer I'm gonna have left." I know 50 is like the new 20 or 30. That's what I tell myself anyway, but I don't wanna wait anymore. That's part of it. So it's like, that's what I'm hoping to inspire other people who don't want to wait anymore, who don't wanna hit publish on that article that they posted that shared their heart, their belief, their vulnerability. I want you to hit post. I want to hit post. I want to hit live, you know? I just think it's for me, and it's not for everybody. So, anyway, I was going to talk a lot as well about my background, but I kind of don't want to do that now. I've talked a little bit about my work. I mentioned I grew up on a farm, but I really want to focus on adding value. And I don't think it's talking all about my background on this session. I think it's more to go in the gates of grief. So that's where I wanted to go today, is talking about the gates of grief. And my printer wasn't working, so this is another thing that would stress me out, right? I don't have a hard copy, so I'm actually using my phone, relying on it to check out my notes so that I can, keep these straight, because they're actually like a list of the gates that are, defined by, Francis Weller. Francis Weller, uh, wrote a book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow, and it's too small for me to read, so let's see if I can pull this up. Let me make it a bit bigger. Here we go. Okay, and I'm not reading this, but I need a guide, because this isn't my work. It's work that I share with others, so I wanna make sure I'm honoring, Francis Weller's, work. And so remembering that the tool is the mirror, right? Which really is self-awareness, which is a painful, difficult thing sometimes for some of us. That's why we have to have a lens of compassion, um, when we're holding that mirror. Compassion and curiosity are essential and requirements. When I work with anyone, I teach them about that. Christian Neff has a lot of work, selfcompassion.org. Very helpful resource, evidence-based, practical exercises. There's even some quizzes on there that can help you kind of look at where you are with self-compassion, because if that is needs to be cultivated a little bit more deeply and widely, um, it's best to do that before you start really digging into, some of those areas that you find difficult to look at. Because if we can't be kept compassionate, we end up shame triggering, and shame, gets that fear part of our brain going, and our wanting to run away or freeze and not take action. And functional freeze is a lot of the state a lot of people are in right now, where they're afraid, but they're keeping going every day, but their quality of life is not not the healthiest. So, okay, staying focused, which is one of these difficult things that I struggle with, is staying focused to um, get my points across. So, the five gates of grief, the first one, and these might be really difficult to hear. So, just kind of setting you up for if you are going through something right now, the loss of a loved one, we're going to go through them, but any sort of heavy grief that you're experiencing, this could be something that's difficult. And so be prepared for that. And in my work, I hold people capable. So you're the best person to know if you're in a state of health that you can kind of listen to these gates and understand them and apply them to yourself, which is the mirror I wanted to reveal today as an important tool for your journey, on your adventure of this life. The mirror in the backpack, right? Everybody's got a backpack with some tools that they use, and the mirror is what I recommend to help you expedite, executing your missions in the most effective and least painful way, but also painful way. It's kind of a oxymoron. Okay, so the gates of grief. Gate one: everything we love, we will lose. Everything we love, we will lose. Sounds very harsh, right? Because reality is harsh. And oftentimes in my work, I've noticed that a lot of the suffering comes when we seek justice. And sometimes there is not justice. And I'm not saying we don't seek and try and work hard to make this world a more just, loving, nonviolent place. We do that. But when we get stuck on something like it's not fair that this person died, our grief is more likely to grow because we're in that resistance, which is normal. The awareness is not so normal. Sometimes we're not aware of how we're positioning our grief, how our grief is showing up in our lives. So sometimes we lose people, we lose roles, jobs, we lose our health, our ability, we lose certainty. That one was particularly difficult for me, losing certainty, because I thought I knew some things. I thought I knew some things about myself. And then when the circumstances changed and I was called to show up in this difficult circumstance, I did not show up the way I had imagined I would, the way I had told myself I would. And I was pretty fortified in those beliefs. So when your world kind of shifts and becomes a little bit rocked, that can create a, a heavy grief. I thought I was. I thought I could. I wish I had, instead of learning what was going on, what was missing, what didn't I see, what do I need to gather from that experience so I can move forward. But we can't go there if we're in shame. So that's why compassion and curiosity and honoring that grief, because really grief teaches us. It's a teacher. We don't like grief when it shows up, but if we put it in the corner, we don't want to hear from it. And we say not today, then we say not tomorrow, and then we say not the next day. Things are building up and it's going to have an impact on your system. It can't not have an impact on your system. The things we do, have an impact. Things we don't do also have an impact. Number two, the gate two, Francis Weller's gates of grief. The places that have not known love. This one hits hard for a lot of people. The places that have not known love. Some of us have struggled with never being fully seen. There's parts of us that we feel maybe are positive and could contribute good things to the world, and we wish those to be seen by others, by our parents, by our loved ones, by our spouse, by our community. And so, I find a lot of us find it difficult to accept that being seen may matter to us, being validated may matter to us. Having encouragement, feeling understood, having a sense of belonging matters to us. And I don't know if we often think about grief in relation to belonging. Some of us do. Some of us know that in our bones, and we have since we were kids. But take somebody going into a new workplace, for example, and maybe the environment isn't welcoming. Maybe the environment is a bit violent, in gossip, water cooler chat, meeting after the meeting. Did you hear what Bob said? Like violence, like that is violence, emotional violence, spiritual violence, physical violence. So when we show up to that workplace, maybe we've never been in that before. Maybe we don't know how we respond in that workplace. We don't know enough about ourselves because we've never been in that situation. And if I had $1 for every time somebody said I should have about a situation that they had no idea about how they would show up in it, but they should have done better. It invites us to get curious about whether we have unrealistic expectations of ourselves and then maybe unrealistic expectations of others sometimes. Proving yourself is a big one for that one, right? The working really hard to prove that you're worthy and have value to offer. And I always say the herd, right? Because that's wired in us to belong, you know, to be of value. So, when we hold the mirror in this capacity around our needs, we're especially called to be tender. We're especially called to see where we may have felt loneliness or othered or that we don't belong. I've had an executive talk to me about how much she felt like she was back in grade 8, as a senior leader in a workplace because of the bullying that was going on and the lunch dates that she wasn't invited to and the social situations that played out. And you know, it, you can be an executive in an adult body and have years of seasoned experience and still be put back in a place where you didn't expect to be put back in and not understand it. Because why would you? Most people were not trained and educated in how shame and central nervous system triggers and how the non conscious mind and survival show up in our daily lives. We do not provide that education. Why? I do not understand why. That's one of the reasons why I ran for politics, because I see massive gaps in the early years that if they were closed, we would reduce our healthcare costs, our criminal justice system costs, our community services costs, or homeless. All of the things are often connected to education and resources, which we could be doing better at. So that's another reason why I'm starting the podcast and starting writing more, because they didn't want me in politics. So I've got to find another platform to share some of the population health approach science to our public policy, share some of the ways we can make our communities, our homes, our own bodies safer, provide the science for people, and we're going to have healthier communities, is my kind of opinion. Okay, gate 3. I have to be, see, this is going to be an hour. So we've got 20 minutes. I've got a client at 4. So I want to be able to get through all of this with it. I want to feel proud at the end that I got through the 5 gates of grief and that the people that are here have found some use out of this. And I hope you'll let me know, because um, I do want to continue to get better. This is like my first real long live. So, okay, gate 3, the sorrows of the world. Oh, Lord. Yes, this one is huge right now. And another reason why I'm doing the podcast and trying to be more courageous, because it brings me more joy. And joy, I am learning from doing some studying, is a historical act of resistance. And there is so much sorrow in the world right now. And that is playing on our bodies and on our minds, on our souls. on every part of our being, when you can learn of or see, bear witness to terror and horrors and unspeakable, and they must be speakable, because if they're unspeakable, they live. Shame lives in the dark. So we need to speak, we need to see, and we need to act. Again, reducing violence. How do we act in a world that has so much pain in it? The more we are on the news, the more that we are on social media, the more we are disconnecting from our own joy, our own community where we can show up and make a difference at the food bank, at the shelter, at the community, at the school, wherever it is. To make that positive influence, we need to do that if we can. If we have the energy, let's be clear, some of us are getting through the day trying to feed our kids. Some of us don't have that extra resource or time, and that's a time when you absolutely focus on yourself and you let others pick up the slack while you work on getting through this time, because it is a very difficult time for so many of us. So, social division, economic stress, the human suffering is everywhere. And so that also, in my opinion, creates to apathy. How do we make a difference in the world? My husband just said that to me this morning, which is like an emotional trigger for me, because you can't say that. We have to be accountable to showing up in the ways that we can if we have that energy that day, in that moment, in that week, in that month, in that year. And sometimes I have not had that. And it's like seasons, there's different times when we can show up in our life full force, and other times when we are in retreat because of the grief, because of the pain, because of whatever the factors are. And the less we feel guilt and shame about it, the more we're going to learn, grow, become more aware, and evolve. Then we can connect more with others. And again, less violence. So we have to have compassion for ourselves during this really difficult time in our society. Gate 4, what we expected but did not receive. That's an interesting gate of grief. What we expected and did not receive. I was going to ask you guys to make sure you had a pen for today's live, because I think, we know from the science, writing things down, writing how they apply to us, helps get it into your bones, helps the neurons make those connections and make it real. So, but of course, you can look up Francis Weller's Gates of Grief and apply this to your own life. But, make sure you do some writing, because that is another really powerful tool. Not only the mirror, but actually writing down what you see, when you're looking in the mirror. It's pretty powerful, because when you move from what's inside your body out into the world, any artist, any writer, any human that speaks knows that it's a vulnerable thing to do, because we don't know how it's going to be received. That's like emotional vulnerability. It's exposure, it's risk, just like doing this live right now, talking for an hour to the world, not knowing what mistakes I'm gonna make, or what, all that stuff. We need to step up in our own ways that we can. So this one, what we expected and did not receive, a lot of times this happens when we look at the, um, a life cycle development of a human. Once we start to get into those later years, we often will look back, and when we look back, which is an important thing to think of now, I remind my 3 kids of that. How do I want to feel every day? What do I want to contribute? What do I want my life to look like? Some things we have control over, some things we do not. So when we look back at that later season, we want to say we're proud of how we showed up. And that famous quote, Maya Angelou, people don't remember what you said or did, I think. I'm butchering the quote, but people remember how you made them feel. And that's the crux of my work. I want people to feel safe. I want people I'm not responsible for that. I can't create safety for people, but I can create a container, where people can show up authentically, to be more themselves, to share the grief, the sorrows, the losses, and get curious about how it's impacting our choices, you know? So what we didn't receive but expected, careers as well, that's a big one, you know? Um, I have a hang up, a program, an old legacy program in my brain because of the environment I grew up in, because of my grandparents. There's a program in there that says you must achieve PhD level, doctor level, because they are, you know, that's the pinnacle. And so, part of me had to rewire that and ask, is that my dream? Is that my value to do a PhD held high and dry? Probably not. Like, it's great for people that choose to do that, but for me, that's not really what I wanted. But there was a time when I thought that's what I wanted, and when I got real clear on that, I don't think that was my story, you know? I wanted to be seen, I wanted to be validated, I wanted my grandparents to think, "Hey, she's done something great," you know? And you know what? Raising 3 kids and showing up for them and having them continue a legacy of love and connection and be good people, for me, that is my legacy. Everything else after that is icing on the cake. The work I get to do, walking beside people, with people, that is that is power to me. That is beautiful, and it's those connections that light me up, and I'm super excited about doing more of that. Relationships that didn't last, so dreams that didn't unfold, careers that shifted, relationships that didn't last, opportunities that were missed. Uh, Sometimes we were too scared to do the thing. Again, that's why this live, because let's do the thing. And if one person does the thing, I think it's contagious. One person does the thing and you see and you question and you're curious, maybe you'll do the thing too. So when I ran for politics, one of the coolest things was a young girl in grade 10, I think, and she wanted to meet me. So we met at Tim Hortons and we talked about why. Why am I putting myself in this arena? What's the mission, purpose? What's the meaning to me? And she did a project on me because during that time of the school year, she was in political science and they had to do a project and the campaign was going at the time. So and I was and still, I'm telling you this story, and that was over 10 years ago, and I'm telling you the story because, like, to me, that was so powerful to have a young person be interested in why I was running, and she was considering leadership in her life, and so that impact taught me that my courage can be contagious for others. So that's why the podcast, that's why writing and doing these crazy lives that scare me. Okay, so moving through to gate 5. This is a heavy one too. One I experienced recently. Ancestral and collective grief. So again, I feel like they are all very powerful, and until you really kind of sat with each gate and dug in with the mirror. And also, I didn't tell you the flashlight too. We'll talk about that next live I do, maybe. The flashlight to help us look in those crevices and cracks, the crannies where certain things might still be living or growing. And that will help us to unearth what we need to make change. So, family patterns, huge. Obviously, as a private clinical therapist, I dig more into those familial patterns, those generational patterns, how our environment, and it's always person plus environment. So, how that environment may have impacted our epigenetics, what genes are being expressed based on that environment and our interactions with each other, generational expectations, inherited coping strategies, very, very typical. Holding that mirror. So many of us do not like to see where we are practicing, behaving, avoiding, leaning in some things the way our parents did. Some of us are very proud of that, and some of us struggle with accepting that we are repeating some of those behaviors. And one of the most beautiful things that I get to bear witness to is young men who do not want to repeat the behaviors of their fathers, if they had difficult childhoods, and they want to be able to show up as dads in a different way than their dads did. And maybe they want to bring forward some of those great ways. And so, we sometimes need a little help with the mirror. So that's kind of what I do, to help people, give them the tools. I'm always trying to work myself out of a job. I don't want to see people forever. I want to give them the tools and get them going, practicing, and circle back with some some guidance around some tweaking. But my job is to give those tools. And so we often don't recognize our family patterns, the historical traumas, generational trauma. It's Our culture kind of says, "Oh, that was in the past. You're in control of what you do now." And so a lot of people have internalized that discourse, and so they don't take space because they've been told by, perhaps, all of the things I'm saying is in general in my own experience and training. Obviously, it's, a lot of people's experiences won't be this, but the culture does say, you're in control of what you're doing, and you are aware. And I promised myself I wouldn't say numbers because I know I'll get some numbers wrong, and I'll look this up, but I'm pretty sure the data is around 40 or 50 million bits of data the brain processes, like 40 or 50 million bits. And we are actually only aware of about 40 per second. So 40 or 50 million bits per second, and we're aware of about 40 or 50. So that should terrify people and also excite people that there's a lot that they can get to know about themselves, by doing some of these techniques, like holding the mirror, getting the flashlight, writing things down, understanding grief. This is only going to reduce suffering and violence in yourselves, in your families, in your workplaces, from what I've experienced. It's simple and the hardest work we'll ever do. So those are the gates of grief. The mirror that I spoke about just helps invite us to come more into presence. So, where am I now? What do I need? Which is something we don't often ask ourselves, because most of the time we're in service to others, our kids, our partners, our communities, our work. We're trying to make impact on the world, and we often forget rest, s- sleep, nutrition, social time, spiritual connection, which is really meaning and purpose. Why am I here? Like, these are all critical for our self awareness and to combat irritability, to combat the grief of what's going on in the world out there, to combat overworking, overfunctioning, or underfunctioning. How can we work with our system and the system out there? Because there's this system and then how it interacts with the world. So, first, starting here is going to help us cultivate more wisdom, cultivate more kindness for ourselves, compassion, and depth. So grief really is a tool for meaning making, and so is the mirror. So I'm going to wrap up now, and I just want to say thank you for those. I feel like there is some people that stayed the entire time, which I'm so grateful for, if that is true. I see that there's no chats or anything like that. I don't know if people can chat, but I just really appreciate having somebody be here and bear witness to my courage, to do a live, and it was almost an hour on, and I'm gonna do another one tonight, but I feel kinda drained now after this one. I might change that one to be more I don't know, I might even cancel it. I don't know. This was a lot. It was really great, really fun. And thank you so much for being here and supporting this work. And if it was of value, I'd love to hear from you. You could send me a message, and if there's anything more you'd like to hear, then let me know that too. And yeah, subscribe, follow, whatever we're doing here to spread the good word of focusing on ourselves to help reduce some of that violence in the world and improve our quality of life and the health of our communities. So, all right, bye for now. And I have a tagline for the podcast. I should have remembered what that was. I think it is the Agentic Self Podcast, where we don't have the answers and we know where you can find them. Thank you.